Order! Order! You are an incorrigible delinquent at times. Behave yourself, man! Order. Urgent question. Mr. David Lammy.
To ask the Home Secretary if she'll make an urgent statement on the status of Windrush children in this country.
Secretary of State for the Home Department, Secretary Amber Rudd.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I would like to thank the Honourable Member for Tottenham for raising this question and giving me the chance to build on what I've already told the House this afternoon. I recognise the concern from some people in the Windrush generation, and I wouldn't want anyone who has made their life in the UK to feel unwelcome or be in any doubt of their right to remain here. As my right honourable friend the Prime Minister has already made clear, there is absolutely no question about their right to remain, and I am very sorry for any confusion or anxiety felt. While the vast majority of people who came here before 1973 will already have the documentation that proves their rights to be in the UK, I know that some do not. I know that there are those who have never applied for a passport in their own name or had their immigration status formalised. That's why today I am announcing a new dedicated team that will be set up to help these people evidence their right to be here and to access the necessary services. This team will help these applicants demonstrate they are entitled to live in the UK and will be tasked with resolving cases within 2 weeks when the evidence has been provided. Of course, no one should be left out of pocket as they go through this process. And so, given the uniqueness of the situation this group find themselves in, I intend to assure that this group will not pay for this documentation. We've set up a web page and have been speaking to charities, community groups and High Commissioners about providing advice and reassurance to those affected, and we will set up a dedicated contact point as well. Tomorrow, the Prime Minister will meet the heads of government, and I will be meeting with High Commissioners this week to discuss this issue as a matter of urgency, and I hope this will provide people with the reassurance that they need.
Mr. David Lammy.
Well, can I say to the Home Secretary that the relationship between this country and the West Indies and Caribbean is inextricable. The first British ships arrived in the Caribbean in 1623, and despite slavery, despite colonisation, 25,000 Caribbeans served in the First World War and Second World War alongside British troops. When my parents and their generation arrived in this country under the Nationality Act of 1948, they arrived here as British citizens. It is inhumane and cruel for so many of that Windrush generation to have suffered so long in this condition, and for the Secretary of State only to have made a statement today on this issue. Can she explain how many have been deported? She suggested earlier that she would ask the High Commissioners. It is her department that has deported them. She should know the number. Can she tell the House how many have been detained as prisoners in their own country? Can she tell the House how many have been denied health under the National Health Service? How many have denied pensions? How many have lost their job? This is a day of national shame, and it has come about because of a hostile environment policy that was begun under her Prime Minister. Let us call it as it is. If you lay down with dogs, you get fleas. And that is what has happened with this far-right rhetoric in this country. Can she apologise properly? Can she explain how quickly this team will act to ensure that the thousands of British men and women denied their rights in this country under her watch in the Home Office are satisfied?
Mr. Speaker, I share the honourable gentleman's admiration for the people who came here from the Caribbean and contributed so much to our society in many, many different ways, and that admiration remains in place. I am concerned that the Home Office has become too concerned with policy and strategy and sometimes lose sight of the individual. And this is about individuals, and we have seen the individual stories, and they have been, some of them, terrible to hear. And that is why I have acted. That is why I have put a very clear time limit on the amount of time it will take to correct this. That is why I am so committed to ensuring that there is no cost involved. That is why I'm so committed to making sure that we can work across departments. We hope to be able to get the information that will be needed ourselves, in the same way that we're looking ahead to the EU settled status, where we will be able to engage with other departments to look at national insurance numbers. We will share, we will lead on finding the responsibility, finding the evidence, so we can get the documents for the people who need it. Finally, on one other point that he raised, I am not aware of any specific cases of a person being removed in these circumstances. That is why I have asked the High Commissioners, if they know of any, that they should bring it to me. And I would ask anybody here, if they know of any such circumstances, they should bring them to the Home Office.
Mr. Damien Green.
Mr. Speaker, the Home Secretary is right to have set up a special unit so that the necessary reassurance can be provided as soon as possible. With that in mind, can she tell the House what's the minimum level of evidence that this new Home Office unit will accept, so that people can be able to demonstrate quickly and easily that they are genuine Windrush generation citizens of this country?
Of course, my right honourable friend, who has some experience in this matter, will be aware that we cannot have a situation where anybody can perhaps falsely declare. That will not help assist the Windrush generation, who we are trying to help. But we are going to work with them in such a way that we can work across different elements of government. So if they come to us with their address and their date of birth, we will start from that point and try and build the picture so we can evidence it, and within 2 weeks get them the permits that they need in order to be able to access the services.
Dan Abbott.
Is the Home Secretary aware that in the week of the Commonwealth Heads of Government, how shameful it appears that we are treating the Windrush generation of Commonwealth citizens in this way? As my friend, the member for Tottenham, said, they came here after the Second World War to help rebuild this country. They worked hard, they paid their taxes, and I will tell the House there are few more patriotic groups of British citizens than the generation from the West Indies that we are talking about. The Home Secretary is talking about her special team. Is Home Secretary aware that hundreds of these people have been trying to get this sorted out with their lawyers, presenting what information they have, and months later it has not been resolved? How much confidence can people have in their special team when people with lawyers have been unable to resolve their situation? Why does she not simply issue an instruction to her officials that today no one can be deported who is in this position until the case is clarified? There must also be an apology to any that were wrongfully deported, and the government must consider the question of compensation. Is the Home Secretary aware that in 2014 the government removed the immigration protection that existed for Commonwealth citizens that had come here previously? Theresa May was then the Home Secretary. There was no parliamentary debate or scrutiny at the time. Theresa May could simply, you put down...
Order. No, focus. Order. I don't need any advice from people chuntering from a sedentary position for their own satisfaction, but to no wider benefit at all. The position is that members should not refer to other members by name. But order. I don't need... The honourable lady wittering away from a sedentary position probably feels better for doing so, but it doesn't advance the interests of the House. Dan Abbott.
I apologise for naming the former Home Secretary in this way, but it is a very serious matter that we are talking about, and I believe that the Home Secretary could now simply put down a statutory instrument restoring those protections which were removed without debate in 2014. There will be no objections from this side of the House. But finally, let me say this. This policy and this scandal did not fall from the skies. It is a product of the bent of government policy, the unquote, quote unquote, hostile environment to migrants generally, We now hear warm words about the contribution of Commonwealth migrants who've given their life to this country. But warm words are not enough. We have to establish the facts on the deportations, we have to make apologies where necessary, and we have to acknowledge when the Commonwealth heads of governments are gathered in London, what a disgrace it is that this government has treated Commonwealth migrants in this way.
Secretary.
Nobody disputes that the people who came here as part of the Windrush cohort are highly valued here and have the legal right to stay. In this week where we celebrate the Commonwealth, I would urge honourable members across both sides of the House to acknowledge the changes that we are making as a government today to ensure that this can't happen again, and so that the new processes in place will indeed reach out and protect all Commonwealth citizens who need the additional help to get their documentation in place. The Right Honourable Lady asks particularly about removals and detention, and I can reassure her and the House that I have given that instruction. In accordance with my wishes today, there will be no removals or detention as part of any assistance to help former Commonwealth citizens get their proper documentation in place.
Mark Harper.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Can I welcome what the Home Secretary set out today, and also the detail that was given by the Immigration Minister in her media interviews today, and also the calm and measured tone in which he set it out. Given that many of the people in this position won't be aware that they're in this position until they run into difficulties, can she say any more about what steps the government could take proactively to communicate what it's doing to some of those who might be affected, so they're never actually put in this position in the first place and can have their status regularised?
Well, I thank my honourable friend, and he's right. I really do want people who are in this position to realise that we have made the changes, we have set up a system which will be easy to use and accommodating to them. There will be no charge for it, and I would urge honourable members across the House to pass that on to their constituents so that people have the confidence to approach us so it can be addressed. But of course the Home Office will be doing its own media to ensure that that is the case.
Joanna Cherry.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Can I congratulate the honourable member for Tottenham in securing this urgent question and tell him that the Scottish National Party share his outrage on behalf of the Windrush generation and how some of these now quite elderly people have been treated by the Home Office. Mr. Speaker, the Home Secretary is wrong. This isn't just about individuals. It's about a systemic policy put out by her department, and it is symptomatic of the politically driven, hostile environment policy. And it's a sign that it has to stop. And I hope in what she said this afternoon, there's a vague chink of optimism that she is going to review this hostile environment policy. Now, Mr. Speaker, I saw in the Mall this morning all the flags out for the Commonwealth Heads of Government Conference, but all the government's warm words about the Commonwealth will be seen as weasel words unless they take proper steps to address what's happening to these people who are as much part of our country as the Home Secretary and myself. Now, I've heard what she has to say about the procedures she's putting in place, but the Migration Observatory at Oxford University say there's up to 50,000 Commonwealth-born people in this situation. What's she going to do to recognise the almost impossible nature of the task they face in evidencing their right to be here? And is she going to give them access to legal advice to help them to combat the Home Office's often unfair procedures?
Home Secretary.
Well, the Right Honourable Lady Learner Friend has raised a number of important points. I would just say that it is right that we have a policy that distinguishes between legal and illegal migrants, and the Commonwealth group, the so-called Windrush cohort, are legal. And that is why I've put in place these measures in order to protect them. I think that is a clear difference between other groups to whom we have a compliant environment to ensure that people who are here legally are looked after, but people who are here illegally should not be here, and we have the information that we can collect to lawfully and correctly remove them.
Sir Roger Gale.
Mr. Speaker, my right honourable friend's assurance that the costs will be borne by the state will be most welcome. It's clear that that may have acted as a deterrent to some in the past when seeking to regularise their position. My right honourable friend make absolutely certain that it's made very clear very publicly that there is no need to go and hire an expensive lawyer to put this right. We can do it.
Well, the very important point for my honourable friend is that the system that I will now put in place will not require people to go to their lawyers. I hope it will be sufficiently constructive, sympathetic and helpful that it will not require people who are seeking to regularise their position to have lawyers.
Yvette Cooper.
The Home Office has been warned repeatedly about failings in its decision-making processes and weaknesses in the hostile environment operation. And her response to this problem now is far too passive, just a task force that relies on the Windrush generation raising their problems with her. That's not good enough. She should now be instituting a huge review right across the Home Office of all of the cases of the Windrush generation, not just suspending deportations and detention, but also working urgently with the DWP and the NHS to make sure that nobody from that generation loses their benefits, their homes or their healthcare while this is being sorted out.
Well, I would respectfully say to the Right Honourable Lady, who usually has such careful knowledge on this area, that it is of course the case that we do not have individual numbers for the Windrush generation because they are not identified as such when they come here. And when the Right Honourable and Learned Lady referred to the assessment of 50,000, we don't know whether that's the case because we don't have identification cards, obviously, in this country, so we don't know. We don't know until people approach us. The point that I am trying to convey here, and I hope will go out from this House, is that anybody who would like to have their system regularised, we will help, we will assist, and there will be no cost to it.
Order. There's intense interest in this matter, and that is to be expected. Interest I'm keen, as far as possible, to accommodate, but I remind the House that there is important business to which we must proceed. Therefore, there is a premium on brevity from back and front benches alike. Put bluntly, if people ask long questions, they will do so knowing that they're stopping other colleagues contributing, and that's not something they'd want to do, I feel sure. Mr. Nigel Evans.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I was sickened to read these stories myself, and I'm reassured by what she's had to say today. But will she ask her officials to review all cases where it is a possibility that the Windrush generation have been deported? Will she ask them to look at all those cases now?
Well, as I have said earlier, I do not have any evidence that anybody has been removed in that way, but I have invited anybody who knows. Some people are talking about as though it has taken place. It has been suggested in some media companies that has taken place, and I would therefore invite people who have any such evidence to bring it to the Home Office so we can take a look.
Chukaramuna.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Can I say to the Home Secretary that the way this trailblazing generation and their families have been treated in this year, the 70th anniversary of the arrival of the Empire Windrush on our shores, is a complete and utter disgrace. Yeah. So many are my constituents. She's talked about individual cases. One has been very well publicised. He hasn't been able to get access to cancer treatment that he needs from the NHS because of his immigration status. Now, she has said these will be processed quickly. OK, that is welcome. She says her department will help people, individuals in this situation, to identify the evidence. What if the evidence doesn't exist? And with regard to healthcare, will she commit to ensuring that indefinite leave to remain is granted?
The Home Secretary, we're immensely grateful. We've got a lot to get through. It's very self-indulgent if people spend ages. I understand the importance, but colleagues have got to do it pithily. It's as simple as that. Home Secretary.
I completely understand the urgency of getting this addressed so that people can have access to the NHS when they need it, and I'm going to make sure that we do it in such a speedy manner that that will address the particular need that people have. It shouldn't interfere with their treatment. The fact is, as we know, the hospitals are increasingly asking for evidence of residence. We will help them get the evidence. My honourable friend has asked for this. There is always going to be evidence of people living in a country, and my task force will make sure that we find it so that we can get it to them.
Blackman.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. We owe a debt of gratitude to the Windrush generation for coming to the aid of this country. Will my right honourable friend enable all of us as MPs to have access to an appropriate means of communicating cases that come to us so they are dealt with quickly, speedily and in the way that we want to see people thanked for their service?
Yes, I think that's a very good point from my honourable friend. I will ensure that everybody in the House has the details of the contact point in the task force, and also that we are able to communicate to everybody who's assisted this country, the people from the Windrush generation, our thanks and support.
Debbie Abrahams.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. What assurances will the Home Secretary give to people who settle from other parts of the Commonwealth other than the West Indies, including many from Bangladesh and Pakistan in my constituency? And will she commit to my honourable friend's suggestion about a statutory instrument to restore the protections to the Commonwealth countries?
The Home Secretary.
I think I will have to respectfully come back to the honourable lady on that point in terms of the statutory instrument. My purpose here today is really to reassure on this particular cohort and to make sure that we have the right systems in place to act swiftly and efficiently as they would expect.
Richard Graham.
Mr. Speaker, I welcome the Home Secretary's absolute clarity that the Windrush generation's right to remain here is unchallenged, and we as constituency MPs want to do all we can to help them. So could she confirm that there will be an MP's hotline through which we can help our constituents most unable to help themselves?
Yes, I am aware, of course, as members of Parliament, as leaders in their own areas, will need to be able to access that hotline, need to be able to access all the information so that we can act fairly, efficiently and effectively with the Windrush generation who are so valued in this country.
Marsha de Cordova.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. A number of my constituents have been caught up in the government's hostile environment policy, including one of my constituents, Paul, who has been here for 4 decades. He was removed from his home and detained at one of the Croydon detention centres. So my question is, again, to the Home Secretary, can she commit to introducing a statutory instrument that would actually reverse and restore those rights that the Windrush generation were secured?
Well, unfortunately, I can't comment on individual cases in this chamber, but if the honourable lady would like to write to the Home Office or bring the particular case that she has, then I will make sure that it's looked at.
Simon Hall.
Mr. Speaker, could I welcome what my right honourable friend has said, but urge her to give consideration that where applicants are ultimately proved to be successful, if they have already incurred legal fees trying to make their case, those fees could be compensated.
Secretary.
Well, I'm happy to take that away and come back to him on it, but what I really hope is that going forward, it is my strong commitment to ensure that the system that we put in place will not require legal advice. It will be straightforward, effective to use, and my team in the task force will work with individuals to deliver that.
Bambos Charalambos.
I wrote to the Home Secretary about my constituent Bill Samuel, who came to the UK as a 6-year-old from St Vincent's with his grandmother back in the 60s. He's worked and paid taxes since 1973. He was told by the Home Office that he'd have to pay £237 to apply for a no time limit status. Can the Home Secretary confirm that he won't need to pay this amount of money or apply for no time limit status in order to apply for a British passport?
Secretary.
Well, I can confirm that we are not going to be charging for that no time limit status that the honourable gentleman is referring to in his question. In terms of the individual journey to a passport, I'm afraid we will have to take that away, and we'll have to look at the individual case.
Anna Soubry.
Mr. Speaker, I commend the Home Secretary for her statement. I would say to her, it's not just the Windrush generation, it is across all of those. Certainly in my experience as a Member of Parliament, her officials unfortunately have a default position, it seems, of no. Would she agree with me, however, that it's at moments like this that we, on both sides of this House, need to accept the need for a proper debate about immigration, an open and honest debate about immigration, and if we did that, we might come to the proper conclusion that it's not just the Windrush generation, but it's generations over centuries of immigrants that have contributed in a positive way to all aspects of life in our country.
Well, I thank my right friend who makes a powerful point about the value of immigration in this country. And in terms of her approach to the Home Office, I share the approach that I need to ensure that the Home Office is more focused on individuals than it is on policy, so that individuals do not receive the type of treatment that we have seen over the past few weeks, but instead have a Home Office that leans in and tries to assist.
Sir Edward Davey.
Will the Home Secretary clarify definitively, will this new dedicated team helping the Windrush generation be accessible to all Commonwealth citizens facing similar problems?
Secretary.
Yes, we will make sure that they can assist others as well.
Like a pal.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. On that note, I very much welcome the government's assurances today to help these Commonwealth citizens, but I particularly wanted to cite a constituent of mine from Uganda who came here thrown out by Idi Amin. Will these new systems put in place help this constituent who's lived in my constituency for 40 years, and he has had a heart-rending experience with people wanting to throw him out?
Well, I'm sorry that the honourable lady's constituent is having such a challenging time, and I would urge her to contact the Immigration Minister to take a look at his particular case.
Seema Malhotra.
Speaker, following her statement, could the Home Secretary clarify that her department is still seeking people to prove their rights, whilst they have no recourse to public funds and no right to work? What is her message to those that may need legal advice but cannot afford it?
Secretary.
Well, it is my firm belief that the individuals who will be able to access this group in the Home Office will not need legal advice, because it will be a simple process, and it'll be one where my team will try to assist. We hope to be able to, we will be able to use information across government, so we will be able to help prove their national insurance number or their school records without calling on them to send in so much. It will be a shared responsibility, which I think will make a big difference.
Steve Double.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Can I thank the Home Secretary for her clear message today that not only are the Windrush generation have the legal right to stay, but they are welcome and that we want them to stay where that is their desire. And will she provide reassurance that her department will be providing every sensitive assistance possible to help people affected by this produce the documentation that they
Well, I thank my honourable friend for giving me the opportunity to reinforce that point. We value immigrants in this country. We value the contribution that the Windrush community have made, and I will ensure going forward that that value is conveyed to them.
Karen Buck.
Is the Home Secretary aware that there is real fear spreading through some of our diverse communities? And one of the impacts of that is that people who are entirely legitimately entitled to make use of public services are being deterred from doing so. Will she be speaking to other departmental heads in order to make sure the message goes out, particularly in respect to the health service, that nobody avoids accessing services because they are frightened of what the hostile environment is going to do?
Well, of course, I don't want people who have health issues not to be able to contact the National Health Service. And one of the saddest things of some of these stories that we have heard has been about people not being able to do that. And that is one of the reasons why I feel so much urgency about addressing this, so that happens to less people.
Julian Knight.
Speaker, I welcome our Honourable's announcements of a special task force. Can she confirm precisely how quickly will cases be processed? And crucially, when she envisages the backlog of cases will ultimately be dealt with, as people need this shadow removed from their lives?
Secretary.
Well, I think the most important thing we can convey from today's statement is that the Home Office is going out of its way to ensure that we can reassure people that they will be able to get that information. I don't expect that there to be a great rush of people who will want to apply, but whenever people need to, I will ensure that that process is done quickly, effectively and efficiently.
Order. I understand the sense of anticipation in the Chamber about subsequent business, but I would just gently point out that we are discussing the rights and the futures of residents of this country. This is an extremely serious matter, and the issue and the people speaking about it should be treated with respect. It really shouldn't be necessary to say that again. Stuart C. MacDonald.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Isn't the key point in all of this that the pernicious hostile environment impacts on everybody, whether they're here legally or otherwise? You can hardly get out your bed these days without somebody asking to see your passport. Isn't it time to scrap the hostile environment?
Secretary.
I simply don't accept the honourable gentleman's interpretation. It is not correct that you have to show your passport at every step. I do think it's important to make a clear distinction between people who are here legally and people who are here illegally. But the point about today's statement is that the people who came with the Windrush group are here legally, and we will look after them.
Khalid Mahmood.
I thank my right honourable friend from Tottenham for his work and leadership on this issue. This decision today will cost my constituents and all the people of the Windrush generation huge amounts of money in legal costs to do that. Will she look to set up a unit within the Home Office to deal with them and refer them back to members of Parliament to deal with it?
Well, I would say to the honourable gentleman that we are setting up this team of about 20 people who will be able to engage with the generation who need to have their situation regularised. I hope that they won't need legal advice. Of course, if that is the case, he makes a fair point. I will take a look at whether we need to assist with that.
Mr. Kevin Foster.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Would my right honourable friend outline what engagement she'll have with charities and community groups to ensure people do not need to go to expensive lawyers to find out about the new procedures she's outlined today?
Well, I share my honourable friend's view about expensive lawyers. We have begun engagement with charities, NGOs, and of course the High Commissioners who have been in touch with us, and I will make sure that we have a thorough public engagement to ensure that people are aware of the process that we've set up and that it will not cost them money.
Richard Burden.
I emphasise to the Home Secretary that some of the problems faced by the Windrush generation go well beyond people who came here from the Caribbean. By way of example, can I tell her about a constituent of mine who was born in a Commonwealth country to Polish refugees from Nazism, who has lived in this country since 1951 and who has served in the Grenadier Guards and who was turned down for a UK passport? Will people in his situation be subject to the fast-track procedure that the Home Secretary outlined today?
I would fully expect them to be subject to that, and I find the honourable gentleman's statement very surprising, so I'd ask him to write to me about it. The default position of the team that I am setting up will be to get the information and to accept people. The only situation where they wouldn't be accepted is on serious criminality.
Tom Bursklow.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I very much welcome the sentiment expressed by my right honourable friend, and those affected may well approach local advice services such as the Citizens Advice Bureau in our constituencies seeking support. So will she undertake to disseminate comprehensive guidance to them ASAP?
Well, I thank my honourable friend for a helpful suggestion. That is an organisation, of course, that I will engage with as well to ensure that they have the information. But I would also urge members of Parliament to tell their constituents about the positive arrangements that this government has now put in place so that the people from that cohort can be looked after and can stop fearing for their situation.
Thank
you, Mr. Speaker. I would be grateful, Mr. Speaker, if the Home Secretary would tell me how I should explain to the elders of the Afro-Caribbean community in my constituency in Bristol West why they are being expected to prove that they have a right to be in the country to which they have paid taxes and national insurance and contributed so much, rather than the other onus being the other way round on the Home Office to prove that they don't.
Honourable lady, that the dedicated team that I am setting up will work with the individuals from her community to ensure that we will look for the information which they will engage with us on. We cannot look in isolation if people don't engage with us and don't give us the information that we need. But we are going to work across government to ensure that where there's a national insurance number or where there's a school, that we try and get that information. Please tell her community that the Home Office is here to help them.
Nasha.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I wonder if the Home Secretary could answer my question. Whether there was previously an exemption for leave to remain for both citizens, Commonwealth citizens that arrived in the UK before 1973. Can she also confirm if and when this was removed from the legislation, and if so, when this was debated by Parliament?
Home Secretary.
What the honourable lady's constituents really want to know is whether they have a legal right to be here. And the purpose of me standing here today is to confirm to them and to all members here they do have the legal right. We want them to take it up if that is what they want. And my unit in the Home Office will be leaning in to make sure that we make that as simple and as effective as possible.
Helen Hayes.
For Cold Harbour Lane in Brixton, where many Windrush passengers came to look for work and make their homes. I can tell the Home Secretary that it is entirely wrong for her to present this as a new problem which has suddenly arisen. It has been going on for years, and it is a consequence of government policy which lacks any grace or compassion, and which in its intolerance looks for any possible reason why people who have come here from overseas should not be allowed to stay. Will the Home Secretary now commit to look at the systemic problems with UK VI and reform the immigration system so that people who have made their lives in this country and contributed so much can live with security and dignity in their old age?
And that is exactly what I want this country to look like. The sort of country where her constituents can have confidence here. I would point out to the Honourable Lady that it was, of course, Labour who introduced the labour market test so that people had to evidence their status in 2008. So this hasn't started entirely with us, but if we want to live in a country where there is a difference between legal and illegal residents here, then it is absolutely right to have a system which addresses that.
Mr David Linden.
Mr Speaker, if the Secretary of State is saying that there's no way of checking whether or not someone's been wrongly deported, does that mean it's the same for asylum seekers as well?
Mr Speaker, I only heard part of the Honourable Gentleman's question, but I can tell him that I do not know of any cases where people have been removed, but I have said to members here, as I've said to the High Commissioners, if they know of any cases, they should bring them to us.
Emma Reynolds.
Speaker, my constituent Paulette Wilson came here from Jamaica in 1968, aged 10. She worked in the UK all her life, including here in Parliament. Last October, she was detained at Yarlswood and threatened with being deported. The Home Secretary says she doesn't know the extent of this problem or the numbers, but surely a simple search by date of birth and origin would give her that data. Will she go away and have a look at that?
Yeah. Well, if the Honourable Lady wants to write to me with a particular case, I will certainly look at it. But I would say that I have put out an instruction today that there will be no detention or removal of anybody in this cohort who makes any questions. So I have removed that fear, but I'm much more ambitious than that. I want to make sure that our new dedicated unit really addresses this and sorts out, to the satisfaction of everybody involved, the individual status of the people who have come here and contributed so much.
Mrs Louise Ellman.
Will the Home Secretary instruct the Home Office to be supportive to individuals who apply under this scheme, rather than leave already traumatised individuals having to meet very, very difficult requirements when they are already in such distress?
Yes, the default position will be to accept. The only real change to that will be if there is serious criminality. We will need to work with the individuals to ensure that the information is collected, but I want to make sure this works for the individuals. As I said earlier, this is about individuals whose lives have been upset, who need the reassurance. I want to make sure that they get it.
Finally, Jess Phillips.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. I often want to offer the members opposite who maybe don't understand what it's like to work with the Home Office every single day, if they would like to come and work in my constituency office, so I put that offer out there. Can I ask, as somebody who works with them every single day, how many people will be in this team and how long will this team last for? Because this is not a problem that is going to go away overnight.
Home Secretary.
I work with the Home Office every day, I would say to the Honourable Lady, and I am aware of some of the challenges. The team will have 20 people in it. It will deliver what I have set out to say today, and we will see how long it is needed. What I'm interested in is outcomes, effective, sympathetic outcomes for the people who need it, who are so valued by this country.